Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this first breakout session of the SEMIC conference. My name is Kristoffer Olsen. I work in the European Commission in the General Directorate for Digital Services, and I am very pleased to see so many interested people in the audience today, and even more pleased to have a great panel of speakers to help me make this session interesting and interactive. Just to make sure that everybody's in the right room, the title of the session, as you can see, is Future-Proof Digital Europe, Innovative Policymaking, and how to achieve that by the assistance of digital-ready approaches and service design strategies. That's what we will be discussing today, and we have a great collection of practices here in the room that we will look at and potentially discuss. Just briefly, my panel of speakers. We have 4 great speakers here. I have Tomas Algotsson, director in the Swedish tax agency. I have Sinnell from the German Digital Service. I have Kristian Vengsgaard, who is CEO or Director General of the Municipalities IT Governance Association, KOMBIT in Denmark. And I have Kjartan Björnsson, who is head of unit in the European Commission in the SG Reform Service, basically. And I will give you each the floor in a turn. First, a little housekeeping. The idea is for this session to be interactive, as in many of the other sessions in SEMIC. We choose to use a digital format for that. We will be using Slido. I would encourage you, therefore, to find the room in Slido for that using the QR code. And during the speeches from the different speakers, feel free to pose a question. For this session to be as interactive and discussion-like as possible, we will be curating, we'll be selecting some questions that have the greatest potential for stimulating a discussion among the speakers. So, thank you. I hope you can hear me. So I would recommend that the questions you ask are of a general nature and suitable for all the speakers. If you have direct bilateral questions, feel free to follow up in the break as such. That would be my recommendation. All right. And then just briefly to frame the session, very briefly, the philosophy behind this session, and now I will be simplifying a bit. I think that's my role as a moderator also, to sometimes oversimplify in order to bring out the nuance from the experts in the room. But broadly speaking, you could say that in this transformation that we are undergoing in the public sector of offering services to citizens, we have moved from a world where services are predominantly procured in an analog fashion to a setting where the first generation of digital service was developed, which may have been digital, but also kind of insular in a way, like focusing on the specific service to be provisioned to the citizens and companies and so on. That might have been sufficient in the early phase of digital service delivery, public service delivery, but in the world that we are living in, where citizens become increasingly sort of demanding and used to services that take into account their whole situation and so on, and also where every euro that is spent needs to be justified and can no longer be spent mindlessly. It needs to be sort of rationalized. Increasingly, we face a demand for innovative policies that means, among other things, that we take into account all the needs of the citizens and the businesses, also that we don't ask them to deliver the same thing more than once only principle, and that we actually consider the data that a solution uses and how this data can be structured in a way that is suitable for reuse, for example. So all of these things are parameters by which you judge a policy's digital innovativeness, and the question is, how do we arrive at that? It's no longer just sufficient to make a linear requirement specification from the legal text. The legal text moves on from being a static piece of text to actually having more a dynamic role in this, especially when you look at it with the techniques that we will be hearing about from the speakers now. So that's the philosophy behind our selection of speakers today, and I'm very excited to hear about the actual practices going on to achieve that goal. First speaker will be Tomas from the Swedish tax agency. Please, Tomas, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for having me here. I'm very pleased to be here. I'm going to talk about rules. Yeah, this one, rules as code. And complex rules becomes uniform and easy to use. and we are using it in Sweden. We have published rule files on the internet, and still investigating if it's a tool that we can use in a proper way. So I'm looking forward to the questions and the discussions further on, so please feel free to put questions. I will talk a little bit about definition, our conclusions and what choices we made, benefits and challenges with rules as code, and how we do it. So I will show you how we do it in practice. And finally, the status in Sweden then. What is rules as code? Rules as code is about coding and publishing rule files as machine consumable code. We had a discussion. We are also, or I'm leading an OECD project within rules as code. 11 countries collaborating around rules as code. And one of the parts there were to discuss the definition of rules as code. And it landed much like this. There could be minor differences between countries, but it's about this. And it has its background in OECD report from 2020 called Tax Administration 3.0. That's how tax agency should work in the future. And one of the building blocks there is tax rule management. And another cornerstone in that report is to be in the customer's environment. No more tax agency in the central part, but the customer's environment. So the rules should be in the customer's environment, in the ecosystem of the customer then. So that's why it is important for tax agency to have rule as code as one of the tools to make it happen then. And we use this machine consumable. We heard a lot about machine readable, but we have that discussion in the OECD project and landed it consumable, and that means that the rules are executable. They are linked to the information in the system, and that can be executed, and it's possible to have automation with those rules as code then. I'll come back to that. And it's easy to integrate it into business systems, and in our work we also include working for digital-friendly legislation then. Our conclusions, we made a feasibility study a couple of years ago. Is it possible to do this, to publish rule files? And it is. It's legal and practical and technical, no issues with it. We made a decision that this is voluntary for the companies. It's not mandatory. There are advantages if you have it mandatory, but that also requires that you have the legal parts in place then. And we don't have that for the moment, and we think it's the best way to go is to do it voluntary, to start in that corner. It's very important with transparency and traceability. Transparency is about not being a black box, as AI is. So this is very transparent. You know, we have also human readable files to the machine consumable files. You can see what's in the files. Traceability is a legal part that is very important. You have the possibility to go back and look, what are the rules grounded on? Is it a law, or is it like a court case from the Supreme Court, or what is it? Or is it an interpretation from the tax agency? So that's a very important part. And one of the advantages is that you can have standalone modules. It's easy to maintain. The legal rules are in a standalone module. In Sweden, we sometimes have what we call spaghetti code. That's when the code is like, you know, in a pot and a lot of spaghetti. It's not easy to maintain those rules then. And also smooth collaboration with AI solutions. I'll come back to that later. So this is legal rules, machine consumable, directly between machines then. Our model that we have chosen is provide legal guidance in business systems to facilitate tax compliance. So there is no special legislation. We are using the legislation as it is. We don't need technical staff when we create the rule files. We have had help by the IT personnel, IT resources, to build this tool we are using. But it's the legal experts that are interpreting the law and also creating the rule files then. And that's a very important thing, that it's a legal matter to interpret the law. It's not the technician thing to do then. Optional use, I have commented already. It's based on open source. We think that's an important thing, to be able to share the editor and also share it with other agencies within Sweden, but also in our work in OECD. We can share this tool we have. We can share it with the companies. They can adjust the rule files. They can do their own rule files if they don't agree with the interpretation that Swedish tax agency have made then. So open source is a key factor then. And also, we are not building the applications then. We are only publishing the rule files, interpreting tax law in Sweden and publishing the rules on our homepage then. The benefits are a lot. Higher level of compliance, easy integration, as we mentioned, in business systems, better provided services, increased efficiency, a new tool, and improved legal quality. We think when we start work with this, we can also talk with the legislator that it's necessary to have simple legislation that is digital friendly then. So upcoming this as a success, then also the legislation will be easier to adopt in the future then. What are the challenges? Of course there are challenges. Is all legislation suitable for rules as code? We have problems with this when we have judgment. The politicians want to have when it's suitable in some way, not telling if it's A or B, but if it's suitable. And that's a problem to code that tax rule then. We can solve it by having perhaps guidance text or things like that, but not all the questions can we solve with rules as code. The legal interpretation is very important. You have to have a standpoint. You have to interpret the law. In our case, it's the Swedish tax agency's interpretation then, and you have put down the foot, and this is the interpretation that we will code. Responsibility is also very important, because if you are doing the rules in the wrong way, there will be damage for the companies, and that will cost money, and they will sue you. They always sue you if you are responsible. So you have to be clear about this responsibility. You can't have a computer as responsible for the rules then. And we have a challenge also with software providers. They have to adopt this and build it in their system, and that's demands for budget and things like that. So we have a discussion with the software providers. And a little quick how we do it. Legal experts, they are interpreting the law, and they are drawing a decision tree, and that's within the tool. The tool creates the rule files in BPMN, the file format. We had JSON earlier, but now it's XML, BPMN. And then we publish it on the internet, our homepage, and we are also using an API for the companies to download the rule files. It's been downloaded 16,000 times, the rule files at the moment then. And finally, the companies are building the application. It could be anything, and they are responsible for the rule files. They can change in them, and therefore they are also responsible for the applications. Current status within the Swedish tax agency. We have published 4 legal areas, and we have 1 API, or 2 APIs, and we are working on further legal areas. We have changed the file format to BPMN. We have a continuous dialogue with software providers. We are using it, or try to use it within the STA in our own systems then. And we are also testing AI as a support for building rule files. And we also understand that rules as code files can be used as guardrails for AI. And finally, my time is running out. This OECD project, there are 10 countries collaborating together, and we have finished one report, will be distributed in a couple of weeks, and we are going into phase 2, which is to code common rules for these countries then. Finally, the last picture. This is how we have the picture for rules as code in the OECD report, where structured data and law are put together in rules as code and then delivered, distributed to tax agency systems, third-party systems, and taxpayers. Yeah, thank you. I stop there.
Thank you very much for that, Thomas. Let's please pass on this clicker. Yeah. Let's move on. Okay, yeah. Let's move on. Thank you. Anna, please, the floor is yours.
I will jump right in. Thanks for the invitation and the opportunity to speak here today. I want to lose a couple words on who the Digital Service is, so you better understand what our capabilities are. We are an internal digital government agency, and our main capacity really is our multidisciplinary workforce. At the Digital Service, we have service designer, user researchers, engineers, product and transformation managers working. What we want to achieve is really a digital state from its own strength. And how we plan to achieve this is we really build digital products and digital services that make the interactions with the public administration easier. But we don't only build software, we also have such transformation projects I want to talk about today. Yep, so how does that fit into the context of digital-ready policy drafting? Really, one of our first services, digital services we built, was a property tax service for private property. Based on the initiation point was a reform of the property tax as a basis. The Federal Ministry of Finance approached us and asked us if we could build a user-friendly alternative to the normal tax service, digital tax service, and we actually achieved this. So we built a user-friendly product. We had almost 1 million declarations submitted. It took 15 to 30 minutes on average, and that for Germany is really not a lot. That is quite quick. And our users were really satisfied. We got amazing feedback, but we were not. And why were we not? The information for the tax declarations, it was all already available. It was out there, but the legislation didn't allow for data exchange. So in theory, it would have been possible that the users just agreed to submit their tax, and every data was grasped behind the scenes, but the legislation didn't allow for such good user experience. And that really is a good example for the mental model I want to present you. What the state defines is the policy, and that is really the basis for what citizens and companies experience at the end. And in between what the state defines and the citizens' experience lies this really important implementation process. Implementation translates the policy into the service. In order to build efficient, user-friendly services, you need digital-ready regulation. The regulation as a basis has to already think through implementation processes. And therefore, we need policy drafters to have a really deep understanding of implementation procedures. Now, policy drafters are legal experts. They are experts in legal fields, but not in technical fields. So how do we get there? This year, we got a new ministry, the Ministry for Digitization and State Modernization. And I'm really happy that they identified better regulation as one of their priorities and made, the German government has introduced digital checks for policies, and now this legislation, they also provide support for the early drafting phase of policy, because in the early drafting phase, you really need to understand the context of your regulation. You really need to understand what's actually the problem. Is regulation necessary? And if so, how do we regulate so that that it really solves problems? I want to present you 3 concrete methods that help making policies digital ready, and after that I want to present you 3 concrete formats that we use to enable policy drafters. One method is, we developed 5 principles for digital ready legislation, and those 5 principles build the basis and really operationalize what does digital ready legislation actually mean. When is a regulation digitally well and easily implemented? I want to introduce you to the 5 principles, but I don't want to make a deep dive. You can read about that on our website. First principle is digital services must be accessible for all. And when we say they must be accessible for all, then we don't only mean the citizens and the companies the policies address, but also those who implement the policies, which are public servants, clerks. Second principle is data reuse requires uniform legal requirements. The EIF really plays a role here. Semantic interoperability really plays a role, and with this principle we give guidance how to apply semantic interoperability to their policy contexts. Third principle is established technologies enable efficient implementation. And that also addresses the topic of digital sovereignty, which we heard from this morning. It's on please build on open source requirements. Please consider open source development. Third principle is on automation and clear rules, and lastly, data privacy and information security build trust. That was the first method. Second method is you really need to talk to practitioners. They know how implementation and application procedures work. Here you see an example where we went to a labor agency actually to see how the application processes work there, to understand what are the problems with working with the applications. Third method is work with visualizations, and a visualization actually can be a rule map. Some visualization that shows decision-making processes. Here you see, for example, a user journey. That is one of our most used visualization artifact that we show, look, this is how it feels for a user, for your target group. Here are pain points, and here's potential for digitization. Here you have rule maps or process models. And one time actually one of our visualizations really made it to the policy draft, which was a great success. 3 formats. Here you see, and I don't know, that is a screen record. Can I just, no, it doesn't work. Okay, it doesn't work. We have a website that has that gives online support and really gives examples for the principles, how they are applied in regulation contexts. We have templates for visualization, so we have lots of digital support tools. Then we give trainings. We teach policy drafters how to use the 5 principles, how to apply them to that context, and we teach policy drafters to make visualizations. We're actually thinking about creating a particular format on rule mapping. And this is where the real magic happens. We have multidisciplinary task forces, teams, who collaborate with the policy drafters for a certain amount of time, approximately 3 weeks, to really focus on the implementation processes of their regulation topics. Together they make visualizations, they conduct interviews with practitioners, they apply the 5 principles, they really discover the problem and try to set the ground for solutions. What you shall take with you. First of all, policy and services, they don't exist in isolation, but they have to be thought together. You remember the triangle graphic. Second, digital-ready policies need new approaches, new methods. You need to talk to the people who implement policies. You need to work with visualizations. And thirdly, digital-ready policies needs multidisciplinary expertise. Legal experts alone cannot manage the challenge. It's just one discipline. The world is getting way more complex, and we need more expertise on the ground for better regulation.
Thank you for that, Anna. Let's give Anna an applause as well. Thank you. Kristian, how are the Danish municipalities doing?
Well, the Danish municipalities are doing great. So I don't have any slides, so you'll bear with me just speaking for a little while. I guess I should press to get the clock started. I don't know. No? Anyway, you're keeping time. So to start off with the policy-ready digital solutions. We've been doing this in Denmark for quite a while. At least the past 10 years, we've been working with close collaboration between digital IT people and the politicians and the people that write the legislations throughout primarily central government. And it's working well. To give you an example, we built solutions for the Danish municipalities, large legislation-heavy solutions, for instance, payments of unemployment benefits. So all of these really complicated solutions. The legislation in Denmark, when it comes to unemployment benefits, is 30,000 pages long. It takes a week to print it. At one point, somebody did it, and they had a webcam photographing the printer printing the legislation, and they had a party along with it because it took a whole week, and they came on to Friday, and they have had drinks on top of the printer, and so on. So it sort of illustrates the problem, right? When it takes a week to print the legislation, it's massive. We just changed that legislation basically completely. We worked really closely with the responsible ministry and discussed all sorts of details in the new legislation, trying to figure out how could we build the system as easy as possible without changing and changing as little as possible in the existing system. So we are doing this all of the time. Meanwhile, once in a while, I get to go to Parliament and discuss with some of the politicians in there. And I presented this for them. And one of the things that they didn't know, just to give you a perspective on the size here, is that they actually put this legislation into law, and then they wanted it to be ready and implemented in the Danish municipalities within 6 months after the law was signed. Then the citizens needed to be treated in the way that the legislation said within 6 months. It took us more than a year to build the system. So we had been building the system, pouring hundreds of millions of Danish kroners into the system before the legislation even was ready and agreed upon in Parliament, because otherwise we wouldn't meet the deadline. So we're far ahead, but we're also really far behind, because it's really a basic thing, right? So we've been doing a lot of that work. We're happy about it, and I think that that all of the things that you've been talking about is certainly the right way to work with this. But I'd also like to lift the problem a bit up, if I may, and discuss the question of interoperability. Because one thing is doing it within one country, within one part of a governmental structure, either local government or central government. Another game altogether is trying to do it across Europe. And I think that we could actually perhaps look at our friends in NATO, because they talk a lot about interoperability when it comes to operations. I had the responsibility of being CIO in Danish defense before I joined this job. So I've been in those talks in NATO. So interoperability legislation is all about political goals. And if the political goals are not clear, if we don't know exactly what we want, it's really difficult. And it's not really a technical problem, it's a problem of understanding where we're going and why are we going there. Von Clausewitz say that war is the continuation of politics, and if there's something then before war, it must be a situation that we're in right now in Europe, which is competition. So what do we do in a situation of competition? What are the drivers that can actually drive interoperability? And from my perspective, there are three main drivers, and all of these are bind together by the idea of making policy digital ready, but there are still different approaches to making us more interoperable throughout Europe. One is the market. Market is driving a lot. There's an awesome buying power in Europe that we can use to have market-driven solutions, and the more we open the market, the more we share the goals, the more the market will deliver solutions to us that will actually be interoperational between the countries and between governments in the nation states. So that's one way. Then there's a problem with that as well, because part of the things we do in public sector, in central government, is something that market will never do by themselves. They don't build a new tax system all by themselves. They will not do this. There's no incentive of doing that. So we need also to push market. We need to go to market and have them deliver specialized, highly specialized solutions for public sector. And if we pool the resources, which is what we do in KOMBIT, we can get more out of the market than we can by doing individually. That means if we can agree on some parts of legislation across Europe, the market will open up and we can use that buying power to have more innovative solutions and more interoperability. And finally, technology. Technology itself can drive us. In KOMBIT, we have built an infrastructure. My colleague Lars here will do a presentation later on that infrastructure. It's an open source infrastructure that delivers a lot of data services for all the municipalities that they can use off the shelf. It means that whenever they want to buy a system, they can actually make a contract, or it's mandated in the contracts that they made, because they're public entities, that they use this infrastructure and consume these data services. That drives interoperability between Danish municipalities. It's a very, very small thing compared to the rest of Europe, but I guess you could scale it. You could scale that idea and say, well, why don't we do the same sort of thinking across Europe building these services, building not an infrastructure in an ordinary way, meaning servers and basic infrastructure, but a data infrastructure, things that we could use across the countries. And I think that would be really a way of thinking it. So, rounding back to NATO and rounding back to the situation of competition with the rest of the world, the situation Europe is in. If we're in a competition system situation, maybe it's possible for us to put away some of the minor differences, things that we think about on a daily basis, which for the member states, for the national legislation is really, really important. But maybe we can put part of that aside and say it's not about policy, it's not about political goals, it's not about what we want as individual member states, but it's actually about the situation that we are facing. Because it's a lot worse, that situation, than the national differences that we might have when it comes to solutions. So to give you a concrete example from Denmark of the way I'm thinking about it is, we have built a system in Denmark called MitID, which is a central identification method. All Danes use it. All public entities use it. All private companies use it a lot. And it's actually driven innovation in a really big way, because all of a sudden the Danes can access insurance companies, banks, public services, all of these things in a secure way, and it's the same way all the way around. And I think that might be possible to do on a European level if we were able to sort of put aside the differences and focus on the competition. Thank you.
Very much for that inspiring talk, Kristian. We'll give Kristian a hand, please. And for a timely presentation, how does things look from the perspective of the European Commission? Kjartan, please, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be in a room full of people that work every day to make Europe's digital public services better. I'll try to give maybe a little bit of a reality check on some of the things here. But first, the EU is investing in digital public administration and services, including through the Recovery and Resilience Facility. And we really must make sure that these investments work for people and for businesses, and that we do not just, forgive me, digitalize bureaucracy. In SecGen Reform, where I work, we help governments design reforms, simplify processes, and redesign services. And I will talk a little bit about some evidence we have. And we note that citizen companies, they prioritize three things from public administration, namely speed and clarity and ease. And, well, sadly, too often we miss on all three aspects in reality. So I'll give you three different sources of this claim. The first one is a Eurobarometer survey we have just done. We have not published it yet, so I'm giving you fresh from the print, about user perceptions. And this was looking at both citizens and businesses' perception of public administration. And across the EU, less than half of citizens and businesses are satisfied with administrative services. Less than half. And there's a big variation between member states. So in Italy, it was only 13%, 1-3, whereas in the best performing member states, it was more than 70%. So a very, very big range. And 7 out of 10 of citizens, they report that they need to engage with the public administration more than they expected. And people struggle to find the public service they need because requirements are unclear and navigation is confusing. On the business side, half of them report difficulties navigating administrative procedures. Now, if we just estimate that the cost of that would be about 0.5% of turnover, which is relatively modest, This amounts to annual cost of 32 billion euros. Yeah, but I'm not really using it, so sorry. There are more sort of background, but thank you for the reminder. There are a bit more background slides than something I'm speaking from, but this was from the Eurobarometer, and that was too quick. So half of these business, so if we look at a loss of 32 billion a year, there is a lot of potential here if we improve. Now, we need to fix it, but, and this is maybe a bit bizarre in this kind of setting, I'm going to say that digitalization alone is not the solution. We digitalize bureaucracy or complexity, we will create a digital version of our bureaucracy as it is. And I think we need to be careful. So we think that we need user centricity and we need business process redesign, and to make it part of the digital-ready policymaking, which is the theme of today. And that means that we need to have structural reforms with cross-agency coordination, but also interoperable databases. And the once-only principle. And I think these are long-term things. They will not be fixed quickly, but we actually also could see some, from the data, some quick wins. For instance, deadline reminders to citizens, or waiting time transparency, so they know when they're going to get certain services. And we need to redouble our efforts to simplify procedures, to consolidate access points, and also review the information that is available. And I think we also heard it yesterday and this morning that it really would be very useful if we have everywhere clear public service information catalogs for users, that we need to have a greater use of pre-filled forms as well, and improve the online portals. Now, moving to the second piece of evidence, we did, together with the OECD, a survey on a major life event in 10 member states, and it covered 15,000 people and 15 life events. And we wanted to know what is the evidence on the satisfaction with actual service, so people that have used a service. And we identified 9 drivers, and I've just mentioned one of them because that's relevant to the topic of this conference, namely the once-only principle. So user satisfaction is 30 percentage point higher if a user does not have to provide the same information more than once. 30 percentage point is going to bring higher satisfaction. This is a huge bonus, and I think this is something that is a great message, I find, for an audience here today, because it means that if we fully implement the requirements for the once-only technical system and the single digital gateway, we would see impact at 3 levels. So first, more efficient public administrations. We would see increased user satisfaction, and we would, as a resulting side effect on this, enhance trust in our institution, which is really important in the times in which we live in. I would want to say that this should be applied within all member states and not just across borders. I think it's quite important. I know that the once-only technical system is across border, but I think it's really important that it applies also within the member states in full. Otherwise, we will not see these benefits. And then the last piece of evidence, we did a study on life events. We looked into both the front office user experience and the back office operations for 2 life events, namely getting an ID and registering a business. And we mapped so both sides of this journey for the service journey, so the citizen step, but also the administration internal processes. And if you look at the process of applying for an ID, it's quite similar across member states, but the time to obtain it ranges from 5 days to 30 days. That's a huge difference, although the process is quite similar. If we look at possible quick wins there, we noted in that study that we need to have clearer information and easier navigation on the portals. We need to explain the EIDs and the electronic signature functionalities. It confuses people sometimes which ones to use. And we need to enable online payments when booking appointments, for instance, because people really get very frustrated if they have to go to the post office and pay in an analog way with all the queues. So back office design, determines user experience. And by visualizing, I think this is a point you made, Anna, by visualizing every step of these live events, I think we can pinpoint exactly where to simplify, where to automate, or connect systems through once-only data sharing. So to conclude, our Eurobarometer survey revealed users' perceptions about public services. The EU-funded EU OECD survey gave insights on individual service experiences, and our live event study demonstrates how to redesign the service as well itself. And I think together they form the strongest evidence that we have had for user-centric service design. If we listen to, but involve the users in our efforts, we can use this evidence to simplify the front office steps, redesign the back office processes, and design rules that are implementable from the start. And when that happens, I think we will see the digital transformation has become real. I will use the opportunity to make publicity at the end for our new online toolbox for quality public administrations, because several of you have talked about the need for good cases, being inspired by others. So the toolbox, you can Google it. You will find there 260 use cases from across Europe. It will allow you to reuse good ideas and avoid reinventing the wheel and scale what works, including on the topics that we discussed today. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the overview. Thank you for the overview and for the inspiration to all of the speakers. So much content here that it would be tempting to unpack individually. Unfortunately, I also have to take my mandate seriously as a moderator. We have 9 minutes left of this session. So I would like to actually try to ask one question in the beginning, which I think overarches sort of all of your presentations. And for me, I don't know, that is the question of cross-border interoperability. I think you all either touched upon it, or at least it seems to me that it's relevant for you. So I'd like to ask you a question. When you consider the concept of cross-border interoperability within the EU, from the perspective of what you are doing, do you see that primarily as a challenge or as an opportunity, or a little of both? I don't know. Is that relevant? Anyone wants to comment on that question? Or
I can
Tomas,
start.
please. Yeah.
I think it's a little bit of both then, because it's a challenge, the sovereignty in legal matters, in tax law. Each country has their own law. That's to start with. But that's not all the truth, because there are rules, perhaps EU, have laws, acts that are common for the European countries. So there is some of the good things with the cross-border thing then. And we also have OECD rules that are common for all countries that are implicated there. So I think it's a lot of challenges we are discussing in this OECD project to find a common rule we can test this rule as code on. And I think that it's possible. And we could also get uniform interpretation. If we work with the EU law, and we work together to make rules as code, then we have to decide the same interpretation. Today there can be different interpretation of the EU law, but if we work together with this, it could be much better.
Thank you. That's one perspective. Will anyone else want to chime in on the question? I think Anna was first. Sorry, Kristian. Ladies first.
So when we first heard of the concept of interoperability across borders, we were kind of laughing in Germany, because Germany is a quite big state with 16 federal states, and we were like, so first step would be if we achieve interoperability among the states, and then we think across borders. But that's a particular situation for Germany. I think it's really important that the Interoperable Europe Act is not seen as another bureaucratic burden that comes from the EU, but it outlines from the beginning the benefits, and it's really smoothly integrated in already existing procedures. And I'm really proud that in Germany we achieved to integrate the interoperability requirements into the digital checks, which were already out there, so there's not another check or another process to be conducted. But we really integrated the concepts, and then the benefits really overweigh the potential side effects.
So the advice is to focus. And thank you for that. There's overwhelming interest in answering this question, so I would just spend a few minutes more on this question. Please follow up.
Yes, so I think that I think you have a great question, but maybe it's not the right question, because you're saying, is it a problem or an opportunity? But maybe it's a demand. Maybe it's actually something that we cannot really discuss whether or not we should do.
Yes.
And that's coming back to the situation Europe is in. We could discuss this forever. And while we discuss this and try to figure out how to do it, the rest of the world is moving, and it's moving in a way that is not playing by our rules. Because they're not discussing these things. In the US, we see Donald Trump trying to steamroll all of the legislation across the states. He's trying to centralize as much power as possible in the White House. We're seeing China, we're seeing Russia. I don't really think that we have the opportunity to discuss whether or not we should do it if Europe wants to come out on top of this situation, or at least still be in the game. So, with all due respect, maybe we should ask that another question. Can we really afford not to have these discussions?
How can we make it possible?
Very timely. Kjartan, a final word in the matter, perhaps?
Yeah, it's difficult not to agree with that, but I think it is both a challenge, of course, and an opportunity. I think the fact that, what Anna also said, that some member states are struggling with this already within, this is an opportunity to get focus on something that is really essential. I completely agree with what you said, but I think what we need to do is to move beyond making declarations that this is great. I do think we need to demonstrate the real impact. I like very much what Francesca said before, but I think we need to be very specific. So what exactly will you benefit as a user? What will you benefit as a business? And we need to throw out these examples so that people can feel it. That's the only way we will convince people that this is the right way forward.
Thank you for that. We have less than 4 minutes left, so I would like to ask, I think from the excellent selection we have available here, there is one question that piques my interest. Digital-ready policies, how can they effectively reduce structural barriers to digital inclusion for vulnerable groups, low income, etc., elderly populations, without creating new forms of dependency on commercial technology providers? That's a kind of philosophical question about how do we get all the groups of the population to see the benefits of this mission that you're kind of describing. Is that something you have any reflection on? Any takers? That's an excellent question, clearly. Maybe we'll do a follow-up on it next year then. Yeah.
I think that is it possible to do it without commercial? Is it possible to do it without market? I don't think so. But I also think that we need to control market. So we sort of have to make the decision on how will we, what kind of services are so mandatory and mean so much for low income and elderly population, as is pinned out here in the question, that we will centralize that and we will control that completely from a public sector perspective. And which areas are more easily developed throughout a market. That discussion is a different discussion than discussing whether or not we should have one or the other.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that, Kjartan. You wanted also to chime in
I just
briefly?
want to echo, it seems like I'm the twin of Kristian here. Sorry. But no, I fully agree with that. But I think it was also the other day we had a clear focus that we should use the providers that are the most efficient. And if that's private, that's great. But we need to make sure that we keep control of the process. And I think a lot of the discussions are about open source to make sure that we are not getting locked in by specific vendors. I think that's the most important thing. But to make sure that we have control, and then I'm convinced that the digital-ready is an effective way of ensuring that we have an inclusive policy, that everyone is covered. and that we are not letting anybody out.
Very quick follow-up.
Yes, sorry, but maybe also when we talk about sort of the groups what we're talking about within the populations here, it's help the helper. It's not digital inclusion, it's inclusion of those people near these people in the civil society that can help them. And how can we provide services for the ones that will help the ones that are not able to do it themselves in an easy way, in a digital way, via platforms that will make it easier for them to help the ones that are not able to work digitally themselves. So that sort of inclusion thinking, I think, is important.
Solid, Tomas. Thank you for that. We have to wrap up here. I think I would like to, within the last 2 minutes, give you each the chance, if you want to reflect on what would be your advice, anyone wanted to copy or learn from your approach, what would be the first step that they should consider if they want to follow you? I don't know if you have any such advice. Thomas, I would invite you to.
Yeah, I think the advice or our experiences is to try anyway and have the goal in mind that in our case the goal is to be in the customer's environment, and we think that's a very important thing. And then you have to have collaboration with the market then, or the software providers. So that's an important thing, as Anna also had in her presentation.
Thank you. Anna, please.
My advice would be build on what's already out there and what's proven to be successful and working. We obviously also, when we introduced digital checks and started iterative service-oriented development, we looked what does Denmark do? What can we copy from the EIF? So build on what's already out there and use the success stories that are already out there.
Thank you for that.
I can keep it really sweet. Visit our stand. It's right out here. And get whatever you want from those guys.
Brief, short and sweet. Thank you. Kjartan, please.
Yeah, so obviously I would say go and check out our toolbox on quality public administrations, these 260 use cases. Now, the chances are that you will find something that will help you, and if you don't, then let us know, because then we will look for the cases that are out there that we can then add to the toolbox.
Boom. And with these words, I think it's time to conclude the workshop. Audience, thank you very much for your attention, and yeah, please give everybody a big hand. So now it's time for the break. I believe it's even the lunch break. So feel free to rush to the lunch, but I think maybe we'll just stand around for a minute or two in case there are some, connections to be made. Thank you once again, and have a nice lunch break.